Well, I don't know about you, but yesterday was a tremendous day out at the park. I woke up this morning, matter of fact, even by the time I got home yesterday afternoon, every part of my body felt the same. There wasn't a part that wasn't hurting. I need to keep reminding myself that I'm not young anymore. I pray I never get that way. I pray that I just keep acting the way we did. Going from there, if you didn't get a chance to be down there, I got to feed them. We're going to be doing that again. It was so we appreciate all of those that worked so hard to get that thing done, and we thank the Lord for providing a very beautiful day for that outside activity. We've been looking about how that God has created us and how He's created us for His good pleasure, and He's got plans for us. And some things that we've looked at, we're looking at how are we to worship our Creator. And just quickly, let me look at a couple of things. First of all, my worship is my response. How am I going to respond to Him, back to God? Worship is understanding what I need to give back to Him. But what do I give? Well, I learned to give myself. Therefore, when I worship Him, I think about how I'm going to worship. When I worship Him, I need to be passionate. I need to show affection toward Him. That's where we were last week. Today, let's just look at some things that's practical. Some things I believe that I believe you can overthink some things. So I've learned that worship is how that I focus my attention on God, how I express my affection toward God, and lastly, how that I need to use my abilities for God. You look around, we're all created differently. Is that just by chance or by design? Think about that. We are the way we are because this is how God created us when we're talking about our ability, our strength. Now, here's something I want you to remember. God wants me to see Him with my mind. I've never visibly seen Him. But when I worship Him with my mind, body, soul, and strength, my soul and spirit, when I begin to vision what He looks like, I worship Him with my mind. But how do you sense God? How do you know He's there? We begin to talk about our soul and our spirit. It's amazing how that our spirit and God's spirit works, and we're not aware, and we need to be so much aware of that. How can you sense the very presence of God or the presence of the devil? And God wants us to sense Him. The last one. He wants us to serve Him with our strength. Now, this is deceiving, because this is how we see ourselves, and yet God sees us differently. This is how we think that God has created us and designed us, and yet God sees so much more than we do. And because we fail to recognize what God sees in us and what He can do to us and through us, we fail Him when it comes to worshiping Him with our ability. Colossians 3:23 says this, "And whatsoever you do, do it heartily as unto the Lord and not unto men." Now, I don't know about you, but whatsoever you do includes a lot of things. The first of the 10 Commandments that God instructed Moses to share with the people was not something that he just randomly let roll off the end of his tongue, so to speak. But there is a reason why that commandment is number one. And he said to Moses, Moses, you got to understand something. I'm a jealous God. Thou shalt have no other God before me. So when we talk about worship, anything else that stands between me and God is an idol. One of the more popular shows that's been on TV in recent years, it's all coming back now. Can't wait, can you? Call it American Idol. And those folks would do anything and everything they could do if they could just win that particular contest. And they idolized that particular moment. And their lives were built around that one particular desire. What do we idolize? Whatever is an idol is something that we worship, correct? And it could be a lot of different things. And yet God says, wait a minute. I'm the one that desires and deserves your worship. I'm the one that created you and the abilities that you have. Therefore, use those abilities in whatever you do. Recognize me when you use those things. Outside of church, when we use those abilities, and it may be at work, it may be at play. Recognize those abilities that are God-given abilities, and in turn, when you recognize those as God-given abilities, that in turn is worship. We don't think about that. When we work, we have our good days, our bad days, good times and bad times, and we fail to recognize that God has given us the ability to do what we're doing. And the one that we're actually working for is not the pain in the rear that's down the hallway somewhere, up in the office somewhere, or on the phone hundreds of miles away. But our boss is one that sits in his very throne room. And so whatever you do, do it heartily as unto the Lord and not unto men. Paul put it pretty good to the church of Corinth. Now, you can say what you want to about the church of Corinth. It definitely had its problems. But Paul had a special place for every church that he had a part. And one was the church of Corinth. And he said this in 2 Corinthians 5 and 9. He says, wherefore we labor, whether I'm with you or not, whether I'm present with you or whether I'm absent. It doesn't matter if I'm here or if I'm over here. It doesn't matter if I'm in the city of Corinth or I may be in the city of Ephesus or Philadelphia, wherever I am. We may be accepted by him. Wherever we labor, Paul's desire was to be accepted by God. Now, how could Paul get to the point where he realized whatever he did, he wanted to be accepted by God? It's because he understood the strength and the ability that was naturally given to him was from God. And he was going to give God all the praise and glory. No matter how difficult the task may be of the day, or no matter how long the day or night may be, he was going to make sure that whatever he was doing, God, you're getting the glory for it because you've given me the ability to do these particular things. Now let's look at something else. Let's go a step farther though. These are the things that we see. The things that we know that we're capable of doing. You can talk about natural ability all you want to, or the things that is naturally there, and then you have to develop those things. I will never forget this as long as I live. Here you've got a guy that when I graduated from school, can I borrow this? Thank you very much. When I was in high school, when I graduated, 6'5", 175. Now you see me, now you don't. I mean, it's just like that. Now here I am, I'm sure I've shrunk a little bit. But now I stand before you 6'4", 6'5", 207, and still overweight, according to my insurance company. Come on, folks, what's wrong? But my first year in college, I remember this basketball coach looking at me, and he said, well, I'm going to make a point guard out of you. Can you picture this guy being a point guard? I can't. Because I played either center or forward when I was in high school. And so an hour before practice even started, I would set up chairs in that gym. And I would practice dribbling day after day after day. And what he saw in me is something that I did not see in me. The ability to handle a basketball. And it wasn't long, and it took a lot of effort and practice. It didn't matter if you were going down the court behind the back or between the legs. It didn't matter. But the ability that he saw in me, he developed that. A lot of coaches will do that when different sports. They see an ability and it's natural, and they say, let's make that individual better. And so that's what we're used to seeing. God goes farther than that. And this is where it takes a little bit of faith. Let me give you an illustration if I can. I take you to the year, and I really thought about this long and hard, 1961. That puts my little brother roughly around, let's say it is in the summer, late summer, very early fall. All I know is this, the crop is laid by. My dad has some time on his hands. And so that puts my little brother about 2.5 years old, maybe 2 years, 9 months, just at the right time to really get around, do some things. And if you go out Highway 34, which used to be an old gravel road, just going toward Neighbor's Corner east of Marmaduke. And before you get to Neighbor's Corner, which is that other highway that goes back this way, back toward Rector and back toward Mound, so forth, so on. You cross 3 bridges. The very first one is Hurricane Ditch. And as a kid, I jumped off that bridge. The next one is Aunt Betty Ditch. I never jumped off that bridge. And the next one was Big Slough Ditch, and I spent a lot of time jumping off that bridge because that was the swimming hole that everybody was at. Just this side of Aunt Betty Ditch, there's a road that turns back to the right. One turns back to the left, but there's a patch of woods that's still there on the right as you go down a little bit. And as you're going down that gravel road on the left-hand side, you'll see a strip of farmland. Look far enough over, you'll see the Aunt Betty Ditch. And there were 60 acres to that little spot. That's where my dad farmed. And there was a house sitting right there on the left-hand side, right across from that patch of woods. And that's where I was raised up until I got into the 6th grade. And just past my house, there was a 90-degree curve. And right there in that 90-degree curve was another house that Cully and Belle Jenkins used to own. And they built a house right around the curve on the right-hand side. And that's where they presently live. I spent a lot of time down at that old Jenkins house that was abandoned. And they still had, I'll never forget this. Out to the side, toward what I call the old pig lot, the cattle lot, they had a faucet that came out of the ground that was about so tall and curved over. And you could sit there and turn that knob and water would come out of it. Well, for years, the only way that we had that is Mom had a pump that was that pump that was over the kitchen sink that you primed and water came out of the kitchen sink. That was the only water that we had. Until Dad finally drilled a well and had a pump put out there, and we actually got running water coming to the house. Make a long story short, it's lunchtime. My dad is home. He'd been pulling an old 6-foot disc, with an old farm-all tractor. And what he was doing, he was just kind of disking off around the edges of the field, trying to make everything look neat. That's all he was trying to do. And he was home for lunch. And I've been down there, and I've been over, and I turned that faucet on to get a drink out of that water, and a spider had bit me right here in the mouth, or in the corner of the mouth. Me and me and doctors, anything that was physically wrong with me, we just didn't handle things well back then. Don't handle things too well today. But I come running home from the house. I was screaming and having a squalling fit. And Dad was coming out of the front of the living room onto the front porch. Mama had me out there, and he got off the steps. He went to get on the tractor. Their mama was trying to figure out, well, what are you talking about? And of course, you know, a little kid, that put me 9 years old, and I was just telling them, oh, this spider bit me, blah, 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 blah. First of all, you got to make mom and dad believe what bit you. And I'm not making this up, so forth and so on. Well, as he got on the tractor to take off with that disc, my little brother was in the habit at that time to playing hide and go seek. That disc had 2 roller blades in the front and in the back. And he had got it between the 2. He reached down, hid, and Dad got on the tractor and took off. And as he was going down the side of the road, the side of the field, he heard someone scream. David's on the front porch. Mama's trying to take care of him. As he turns to look and see what I'm doing on the front porch, he sees 2 sets of legs dangling out the back of the disc. And he had been dragging my little brother all the way down with that disc. He jumps off that tractor. He goes down with one hand. He picks the back of that disc completely off the ground and pulls him out with the other and drops it down. Now, when I see him coming up to the house, and I see, just like yesterday, I see him running up to the house. I see my little brother, his nose is bleeding. His face is skinned up, got gumbo dirt everywhere. I don't think about the spider bite anymore. My mom certainly had forgot about me. And they take him to the doctor, and all it was done was a bruise of leg muscle and just skinned his face up a little bit. Now, here's what I want to tell you. After that was all said and done, late that afternoon, my mom and dad went back out there to try both of them to pick up the back of that disc, and they couldn't budge it. Now listen, no one made my dad any different. Nothing had physically changed about my dad. It was the same guy that woke up that morning, that went to bed that morning, that picked the back of that disc up that afternoon. That was the ability and strength that God had already put within each and every one of us, except this time, God worked through that. And you can't tell me any different. You can't tell me that was not a God thing. Now, this is what we've got to understand. We're looking at our abilities. We're looking at our strengths and our weaknesses, and we see our weaknesses more than we see our strengths. And we get satisfied in letting God serve us this particular way. And God said, wait a minute. Let me do something through you that will get the attention of others. That's what we should desire, and that should be our desire to serve God that way. Now listen, I'm not saying that God doesn't use the natural things about us. He does. But it shouldn't stop there. I'll give you an example, a couple quickly. You remember Moses, prior to him meeting God out in the backside of the desert, was raised in Pharaoh's court and very educated in Pharaoh's court, except it didn't matter how educated he was, it didn't matter how self-confident he was, he still didn't have the natural ability to stand in front of someone and speak. That was one of the excuses that he gave God in regards to God said, I'm going to make Aaron your mouthpiece. Paul, the great missionary that we see in the New Testament, that wrote the majority of our New Testament, he told the church of Corinth very early in the letter, when I came to you, I came not with excellency of speech, We begin to talk about the very power of God that they witnessed. Not him, but something else. And then when God said to Moses, go tell the people to let my people go, it was God working through Moses giving those commands, not Moses' natural ability. I stand before you today telling you that this is not natural for me. This has never been natural for me. Never. But this is what I've allowed God to do through me. I would be much happier being an introvert. But this is how God has chosen to work through me. And until he chooses differently, then I'm going to allow him to do that. You see, worship is letting God use what he has created. Who knows best how to use a tool except the one that created that tool? Knows just exactly how it can be used and effectively. That's how we ought to consider ourselves. We are a vessel that God has created. And our desire should be this, that we should choose for this vessel to be a vessel of honor. The purpose in which he chooses to use that vessel is his choice, not mine. It's his choice, not mine. As a kid brought out on the farm with an old outhouse, very familiar with corn cobs and Sears and Roebuck catalog, I'm thankful for the creator of toilet paper. Hello. Take that home and talk about it this afternoon. Listen, God has created us. And so we should give him our attention. We wrap it up. Sometimes he gets our attention, but we should rather give our attention to him. Secondly, we should show our affection toward him. Show him how much we love him. Well, it's hard for me. Great. He knows that. That's why he has placed inside of us something that we could not do on our own, and that is to love him back. The old nature cannot do that, so he created a new nature in us, to love him back. Thirdly, our abilities. The way that he made us. And if we give him our attention, if we give him our affection, and if we give him our abilities, he's going to take care of everything else. Read Psalms 37 sometime. And see what he says. And you'll find out how far we are from that type of faith that's demonstrated in Psalms 37. Because we stress and we worry and so forth and so on. God pays attention to us. And he's happy. He delights in every detail in our life. Well, Nathan's not here today, but I want to share this anyway. I did get back to him. I'm reminded in the hobby that I had in regards to building and flying radio control airplanes and building. I was very picky about how an airplane looked on the outside. didn't make them fly any better. I've had one person after another after I would take a plane to the field. Are you going to fly that? Yeah. It's too pretty to fly. Nathan shared with me years ago. I'll never forget it. He just simply said this. And we were talking about something else, but it applies to a lot of things. He says, pay attention to detail. I've never forgotten that. I have never forgotten that. Pay attention to detail. That's just exactly what God does in my life and your life. He pays attention to detail. We do not, but He does. And when we understand how He looks at us and why He looks at us the way He does, maybe then we might be able to look at Him just a little bit differently. Don't know. We might. Now, the greatest mistake that I can make in my life, and you can make in your life, is this. What is my purpose? Okay, God, you created me. What for? What for? Well, if that is your question, ask the one that knows the answer. You may not like the answer because it's going to require some effort on our part. 3 things. I'm going to give Him my attention, my affection, and my ability. Right back to Him. And in turn, it's more than just what we're doing here today. It's outside this church where we have the impact. That's worship. I don't know about you. I had a lot of fun yesterday. Now, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 o'clock this morning, rolling around, tossing in front of the bed, I wasn't having a lot of fun getting up or trying to get up. What we did yesterday, was that worship? Yes, it was. Well, we didn't act like we were holy. We didn't sing those songs and have those dull sermons and prayer. We need to get a different definition of what worship is. What do you think about this or not? Whatever I think about the most is usually what I love the most. Whatever is on my mind the most is usually my idol. When I read that and I thought about that this week, I didn't like the way I felt. Because what I realized this week, God, you're not on my mind as much as you need to be. And if we were all honest, we'd all say the same thing. So let this be a turning point in our life. So if I know that I am created for a plan, and I'm planned for God's purpose, and that is not just for Him to love me, but for me to get to know Him and love Him. If I know that, then I can get a better understanding, and it's not on the screen, but it's something that I found and I wrote down. Then I found what in Colossians 3:17 says, and whatsoever we do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God and the Father by Him. Whatsoever we do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God and the Father by Him. And that is a good definition of worship. So these last few weeks, we've just shared some important things, created for a purpose. And we begin to understand some of those purposes of life. It's pleased God that He created me. It's pleasing to God as we develop spiritually. But hey, are we giving Him our attention? Some Christians are not. Are we giving him our love and devotion and affection? Some Christians are not. Are we giving him our ability back to him? Some Christians are not. Head bowed, eyes closed.